Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Monica Farfan. I am a former executive director of the GSBI, and I'm here this morning to begin this remembrance of Diana Wall. There's a couple of housekeeping things that I would like to remind you of. First of all, please know that you can share your memories of Diana in the chat. We will not be having any official question and answer at the end of this particular webinar, as we normally do. This will be recorded. It's being recorded right now. What you should know is that in a few days, this will be made available to you for sharing to your colleagues and anyone who would like to know more about Diana. Let's see, what else? I'm going to introduce Johan Six, who is one of the three science chairs for the GSBI right now, and he is going to be moderating this session. Johan, I turn this over to you.
Yes, thank you, Monica. First of all, thank you to everyone for joining the webinar to remember and honor Diana. And so today we will have indeed 5 people that will be, giving some input on how they remember Diana and what they thought was special about Diana. But as Monica already indicated, it would also be very nice if you could contribute to this remembrance and basically share your memory in the chat, because this will be part of the recording then too. And so it will be, basically your memory will then also be there forever. So with that, I would like to introduce the speakers of today. So first we will have Val, and she is a honorary research associate in Canada, is globally known for work on orbited mites, and she continues that even though she is already retired. And she was actually one of the inaugural members of the Soil Ecology Society in 1987. I think many of you know the Soil Ecology Society. We've had, some great meetings and conferences with that society. And so it's also very nice that Val was actually one of the inaugural members. Val started collaborating with Diana in 1994, so it's been quite a while, and indeed Val will, mostly talk about these collaborations. But she actually also met Diana already in 1971, so the history goes actually quite far. And that's also why Val is actually starting with talking about Diana. The second person we have is Byron Adams. He's the department chair of biology at Brigham Young University. He is working on evolutionary biology of soil organisms, and with a main emphasis on how that can explain the responses to environmental change. And Byron actually has, he has a very long collaboration with Diana in Antarctica. It started in 2002. And so in his presentation, he will focus on the days in Antarctica. Then we have Dorota Porazinska, who is an associate professor at the University of Florida. And she looks at how soil communities are structured and assembled, and how that then has an influence on ecosystem functioning. She worked with Diana as a postdoc from 1998 to 2004. It's actually when I was sharing an office with Dorota. But Dorota also continued to collaborate with Diana, and so she will be talking about also these, those days of working and the work style that Diana had. Next, we have Kelly Ramirez. She's an assistant professor at the University of Texas in El Paso and looks at influence of global change pressures on soil microbial communities, plant-soil interactions, and then ecosystem and how that influences ecosystem functions. Why we invited Kelly in many ways is because she actually was the first GSBI executive director, and she was that from 2012 and to 2014, and so she will, give some reflections on that time as the GSBI director, executive director, together with Diana. Then we have André Franco, who is an assistant professor of soil ecology at the Indiana University. And he, was in Diana's lab, also as a postdoc for quite some time. And he will basically focus then on the mentoring style and how Diana mentored, people in the lab. And then last but not least, we also have Carlos Guerra, who is an associate professor at the University of Coimbra. He focuses on macroecology of soils, their biodiversity and functioning, and is leading the Global Soil Biodiversity Observation Network. And it's through this that he has actually worked quite a bit with Diana, has also become friends, and so he will give a perspective from that standpoint. So with that, I would like to invite Val to give her a short presentation.
Thanks so much, Johan. And can you hear me properly? Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Monica. So to me, Diana was the biodiversity weaver. She seamlessly interlaced the diversity below ground with that above ground. And she had a formidable approach to collaboration, and that's what I'd like to talk about. Now, I was first exposed to that at the workshop that she organized at the Natural History Museum in London in 1994. And this workshop was on life in the soil, soil biodiversity, and its importance to ecosystem processes. She got 50 scientists together, many of them really eminent, such as Robert May, and we basically brainstormed for 2 days in a format that Diana repeated in subsequent meetings. And this was that we formed small groups, had breakout sessions. Each group had a note taker, each group had a rapporteur. And at the end of every 4-hour period, we would get together and report on the brainstorming that we had done during the previous time. And from this workshop came the report, Life in the Soil, which I think had a big impact on UNESCO's Diversitas program. And as I say, this format is something that Diana did in subsequent workshops, because she recognized that for collaboration to be effective, it needed to be transdisciplinary. So she reached out to complementary communities of scientists, bringing them together at the table, and so that they in turn recognized that combining forces would improve outcomes. There was no sticking to our individual taxonomic or process stovepipes where Diana was concerned. And she pushed through this type of collaboration, especially through her leadership on the subcommittee on soils and sediments of the scientific, it's a subcommittee of SCOPE, the Scientific Committee on Problems of the Environment. And through the years 1997 to 2004, almost annually, she held workshops, and which followed the same format. We would have breakout sessions. We would gathered together, and from it came many, many, many publications. There were publications on biodiversity and ecosystem function in soil, soil biodiversity and hydroecological cycles, interactions between biodiversity below ground and above ground, and soil sediment and marine biodiversity. And that previous slide was of the meeting, one of these meetings on soil sediment and marine biodiversity. And from these workshops came a number of really important publications. Yikes, this is going way too fast. I have no clue why this is happening, but in any case, let me continue. From this came a number of important publications, such as the Sustaining Biodiversity and Ecosystem Function in Soils and Sediments, and arguably our 2012 publication on soil ecology and ecosystem services. Because more than anything, Diana recognized that talking in isolation to governments and policymakers was unsuccessful, that inclusiveness was all important. And from that, she co-founded the GSBI, which, when you think about it, is an extraordinary organization. It is international, it is informal, and it is inclusionary. And it produced this Global Soil Biodiversity Atlas in 2016, which was the first global assessment of biodiversity below ground. Now, Diana recognized that you needed to ensure broad media coverage and exposure of key messages. And she did this in a number of ways. She organized a number of symposia at the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences. And of course, she co-organized the GSBI conferences, the first one in China, the first one in France, the second one in China, last year in Dublin, Ireland. And she will be enormously missed at the meeting, the next GSBI conference, which will be in Victoria, Canada in 2026. Diana recognized that a clear, actionable path from the entire research community is more likely to be successful with government than is a mosaic of varied recommendations, and that you need to give government people, policymakers, the answers to the questions. What should we do? How do we proceed? And an example of this is the policy brief from 2007, which dealt with diversity in soils and sediments, and basically is a glossy 4-page document that you can give to any policy person with the answer, what do we do and how do we proceed? And another good example of her shaping the talking, or contributing to shaping the talking points around issues that world governments find important, is the FAO report, State and Knowledge of Soil Biodiversity. Governments are interested in things like climate change, desertification, loss of agricultural soils, and she saw that you needed to be laser focused and address your responses to government priorities. Now, my career, basically, as Johan said, is and was on soil mites. But Diana made sure that I contributed to the broader picture of soil biodiversity. How could I honor her? Well, Dave Walter had worked with Diana in Colorado in years gone by. So he and I described Undulori Beatty's Diana. It is the unique representative of this genus in North America, and we thought a fitting honorific for an amazing woman. You see, Diana saw possibilities. She saw how and where people could collaborate. She saw the big picture, and she worked the government and academic landscapes harder than anyone. She dragged soil biodiversity from being a regional or country-specific effort with very little collaboration between the stovepipes of taxonomic groups and specific processes into a UN-sanctioned global endeavor. And I leave you with this photograph from the inaugural meeting of the Soil Ecology Society in 1987. It was held in Columbus, Ohio. And there's Diana centered with Dak Crossley on the bottom right, Dave Coleman, Dennis Parkinson, and Clive Edwards. Central people to getting this organization going. We were all there. You can look and you can see your supervisors. Collaborate, involve the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Val, very much for that. And if I could now ask Dorota to present her memories.
Good morning, good evening, whatever time you are in. I met Diana through Dave Coleman when I was his master's student. Diana occasionally visited Athens, and first what I noticed about Diana was that she walked fast, she talked even faster, and she was incredibly excited about nematodes, and it was contagious. 6 years later, after I finished my PhD, I was very eager to work for Diana and was fortunate to join her lab as a postdoc. Diana still walked fast, talked fast, but her excitement and commitment to nematode diversity and soil biodiversity in general had only intensified. I was hired to be a part of two main projects. One in the Konza Prairie in Kansas, and the other one in the McMurdo Dry Valleys in Antarctica. Both projects focused on how soil biodiversity affects ecosystem functioning, where in the Konza Prairie, we try to also link it to the above-ground diversity, especially plant diversity, and in Antarctica to abiotic soil factors and climate change. Working with Diana on these two projects instilled in me two main ideas, gave me two main lessons that have stayed with me throughout my entire career. First, Diana's excitement and commitment to soil biodiversity became mine. I have never strayed from it and never regretted it. So thank you so much, Diana, for this. And second, Diana's collaborative spirit and approach to working within large cross-disciplinary teams also became mine. I have never strayed from it and never regretted it. So thank you, Diana, for this too. While Diana's excitement, teamwork, and collaborations were evident wherever she was, they reached a completely different level in Antarctica. So my best memories of Diana are from there, especially that in Antarctica, I also got to know Diana more at a more personal level. Because we all know that Diana was a very private person, but also incredibly dedicated to her work, leaving very few opportunities to know her beyond her scientific persona. During my time in her lab, she was the director of NREL, and this could be a full-time job in itself for anybody else except for Diana. So in addition to that, Diana managed her own lab, wrote proposals, manuscripts, and traveled extensively to give presentations and workshops. And there was even a running joke in NREL back then for who was topping the competition for air miles, and Diana was definitely in the top. She was at the same time the president of the ESA, the chair for Diversitas International Biodiversity Observation Year, for Scope's Committee on Soil and Sediment Biodiversity and Ecosystem Functioning, and became an Aldo Leopold Fellow. Now, despite her busy schedule, she also was able to find time to run and swim. She encouraged me to join her at a local lab pool for her 5 a.m. workouts, which I did once. It was too early for me, but not for Diana. She needed to be back at 7 o'clock in the a.m. in her office. But if it was not enough, Diana traveled religiously to Antarctica every single year. But it was during these trips to Antarctica that I got to know Diana as just Diana. So these pictures here are from my last trip with Diana to Antarctica in 2006-2007 season. And this is more or less how I would see Diana. More relaxed, more radiant, more vulnerable. Here we are in Christchurch in New Zealand waiting for a flight to Antarctica. But while waiting, we had an opportunity to enjoy the great weather, food, and beer. And God knows Diana liked beer. But most importantly, we got to enjoy the companionship of our Worm Herders team. The most special thing about Antarctica was that Diana was hands-on for all field and lab work, basically taking her out of commission with all the responsibilities that had waiting for her back in the US. Here on the left, we are taking a break for lunch and to warm up in one of the huts at Lake Fryxell. And on the right, waiting for the helicopter flight from Lake Hoare back to McMurdo Station, with Diana comfortably plopped on the ground, just being happy that all went according to the plan, and all of us being happy that none of us interfered with the perfect plan. And here where Diana is part of our work in the lab. Back in Colorado, she was too busy with her administrative responsibilities to participate on a regular basis in the lab. But on the ice, she would be in and out of the lab all the time, every day, doing whatever what was needed to do, whether it was extraction of nematodes, counting them, or whatever else. One thing to notice is Diana's Antarctic fashion collection. She would actually have a special set of clothes that she would wear and leave in Antarctica, so she did not have to carry it every time she went there. So this is why Diana always appeared timeless in Antarctica. And here are some pics from the 2000-2001 season. Back then, most of our work in the field consisted of one-day trips. So most of our time, we were stuck in the McMurdo lab processing samples. To break this monotony, Diana always managed to get us to the field for exciting overnight stays at the Lake Hoare camp, where we could sleep in tents and have no showers. This particular trip overlapped with an epic New Year's Eve party and an even more epic field day on the New Year's Day with the Glacier team led by Andrew Fountain here sitting next to Diana. This is when I fell in love with cryoconite hulls, these mini ecosystems that support microbial food webs. Initially, Diana was not too thrilled about my new interest, but eventually, with some convincing from myself and others, she warmed up to it. Years later, it led to some awesome collaborative work on microbial community assembly, testing basically the theory of community assembly using these micro ecosystems. Diana was also very keen on socializing. And since McMurdo Station is just a quick way away from the Kiwi station, Diana used to invite and host her Kiwi colleagues. Here we are in the wine bar at the American station, hobnobbing and developing our own collaborative networks with the New Zealand colleagues. But Diana's collaborative spirit extended beyond the scientific colleagues and extended to the station's support staff like carpenters, mechanics, or pilots. She wanted us, the warm herders, to be the best beakers and supportive of anyone who supported our project. So on the right, we have an awesome picture with one of the carpenters. So to finish this, I will be forever grateful to Diana for taking me to Antarctica. Without her, I would have never seen it, never lived it, or loved it. But without Antarctica, I might have never seen the true Diana. So cheers to Diana and Antarctica. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorota, for that. And so now we're going to continue actually with Antarctica and have Byron also present on the Antarctica work.
I first met Diana Wall in 1997 in this university lecture hall at Creighton University. I was a graduate student at the University of Nebraska, which is about an hour away or so. And my advisor in our lab, we've been reading papers from Diana Wall, getting into her work. And one day my advisor, graduate advisor, said, "Hey, Diana Wall is giving a lecture over at Creighton University. You should go." You should go check it out. And we all got in the van. We went there that night, and Diana gave this awesome lecture on, of course, soil biodiversity. And I was kind of sitting in the back, shy graduate student, so I didn't really say anything during the Q&A. But then after the lecture was over, people were leaving, I went down and chatted with her, asked her a couple of questions, introduced myself to her, and she's like, "Well, I really don't have like a ton of time here in the building, but I've got some time before I catch my flight tonight. Would you like to come and have dinner with me?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, great." Me and a couple other graduate students, we got invited to go have dinner with Diana Wall. This was like, she was a big thing at the time, and I thought, man, like to be around her must be awesome. She took us to dinner. She asked us questions about our research. She made us feel really special, made us feel like we were making a difference, and was super inspiring to us. And so that was the first time I met Diana. And then a year later, I was invited to participate in a symposium at the Annual Society of Nematologists meeting in that building there, just to the left of the arch that you can see. And there were two symposia that day. One was led by Virginia Ferris, and she led the symposium on speciation and species concepts and things like that. And she invited the biggest shots, the biggest names in species concepts and speciation, and also me. And then the second speaker, the second symposium that day was led by Diana. And she invited all of the biggest movers and shakers in biodiversity at the time. And I gave I got to go last in my session. And I basically kind of got to stand up and say, "Hey, the way that these other people are thinking about species and speciation are messing up our research programs in biodiversity and stuff like that." I went on to show how they're doing that. And then the keynote speaker in Diana's session was Peter Raven, who at the time was the advisor to the President of the United States, his Science Council. And so he was also a really big shot. And at the end of his remarks, he got up and said, "Hey, we need everybody to get on board with what Byron's doing and how he's thinking about biodiversity so we can push the field forward." And afterwards, Diana came over, gave me this great big hug, and my stock with Diana went way up. And we started to collaborate a little bit more and stay in touch back and forth. And then a year later or so, I was at the University of Florida as a professor. So I had my first real job as a professor there. And one day I got a phone call from Diana. And she said, hey, I've got this research project down in Antarctica, and we could really use somebody with your skill sets down there. Could you come give us a hand for a season and see if you like it? And I went down my very first season and was totally blown away by the landscapes. And everywhere I looked, I saw a testable hypothesis. It was just amazing. And I absolutely loved it. I loved being with her. I loved being with her colleagues. She introduced me to all of her friends and colleagues. And it was this incredible experience. And I remember thinking, this is what I want to do. And how do I keep doing this kind of stuff? So I started writing my own grant proposals so that I could also be down there. And this is one of my favorite photographs of Diana and I together because it exemplifies our relationship. And it's really one of mentor and mentee. And Diana helped me to craft the first grant proposals that I wrote. She helped me understand how to do that, how to be persuasive, how to ask big, important questions. And it was incredibly helpful. Like we all have mentors in our lives that help us, learn how to be a better scientist and how to articulate our ideas. And Diana was that person to me. And I got most of this mentoring like Dorota. I got most of this mentoring by spending time with her together doing field work. And this is an example of me saying something outrageous and Diana saying, you better knock it off, you knucklehead, and get on with the real game. But she was a terrific mentor. The times that I spent with her in Antarctica are very precious to me. In order to write those proposals, I used to love this. Diana would say, hey, you got to get that proposal done. Why don't you fly out to Fort Collins and stay with me and we'll work on this proposal for a few days and we'll get it done. And I remember being at her kitchen table, we've got our laptops out and Diana is standing up and her cell phone is sitting on the table and she's trying to make a point. She's arguing a point with me. We need to do this or this needs to go into the proposal or something like that. And the cell phone starts to ring and we both kind of glance over at the cell phone and we can see like the caller ID thing pops up and the caller is Al Gore. And I remember looking at that and then looking up at Diana. And Diana just keeps arguing with me. She keeps making her point. She's got a point that she wants to make, and she makes her point. And after she's finished, she looks back at the phone and says, yeah, I should probably take this. She picks up the phone, answers it, walks into the room. And I remember thinking, dang, that just happened. Like Diana's orbit includes people that are not in my orbit at all. And I remember thinking, dang, she's really something. But the other thing that was really something, like her 5 o'clock swim meets with Dorota, which I also got to participate in. Years later, we're writing a proposal. And one of the most recent ones, and she says, "Hey, we're getting up." And this was true every time we got together to write proposals. She would say, "We got to go to the gym in the morning, before we write our proposal." And I remember thinking, "Okay, we're going to go to this gym, and her personal trainer is this guy who trains the Denver Broncos." But I remember thinking, at this point, she's in her mid to late 60s. I'm like, how hard could it be to keep up with this woman? And we get to the gym, and she just totally spanks me at all of the different things that their trainer's putting her through. And I remember thinking, this woman is just incredibly fit. She is going to live forever. But I feel really grateful to have spent one of the last field seasons was a very long one and a very challenging one. We had 2 projects in Antarctica that year, one in the southern Transantarctic Mountains and then one in the McMurdo Dry Valleys in southern Victoria Land. And this was a project that we'd spent, a year or 2 writing the proposal, and then to do the logistics and actually have the project come together took like 5 years. And it was something that we thought about a lot. It was going to be this really cool project where the experimental design involved us, hiking to the tops of these mountain peaks and collecting soil samples along elevational gradients. Along a latitudinal gradient associated with the Shackleton Glacier. A lot of field work. So two weeks of field work every day, getting up in helicopters, flying out in the middle of nowhere, and just hiking. And I don't have to, I know I'm preaching to the converted because you've all spent all day packing soils around, going up and down hills and stuff. And it was a really rigorous project. Just to give you a sense for what this looks like, I mean, rough terrain, rocks, high elevations. It was really tough. And after the first or second day, I saw Diana was kind of gimping, you know, kind of limping on her leg. And I was like, "What's up, Diana? Like, why are you gimping?" She's like, "I don't know, she says, my leg's hurting me a little bit. It's kind of bothering me." And she'd say, like, "I'm not sure if I can really hike up, or if I can really do the miles that we need tomorrow." And I remember I kind of laid into her. Like I started harshing on her a little bit, saying, "Hey man, this project's been in the works for years, and we got to get the field work done, and I'm counting on you to, you got to do your part." And I was pretty hard on her. And she did. Like every day she got up, she did her part, she hiked, she packed the soils in her pack. And, after that, there really wasn't any complaining. And then, we got back from the Shackleton, did all of the LTR work in the McMurdo Dry valleys. And then we redeployed, got back home. And a couple weeks after we've both been back home, we scheduled a Zoom call to talk about science, of course. And then as part of that call, I said, "Hey, Dinah, how's your leg doing?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, when I got back, I went to the doctor and had it x-rayed. It was broken." She had spent the entire field season helping me to do this science, like doing hard things with a broken leg and hardly even complaining about it, just gritting her teeth and pushing through it. And I really think that exemplifies the way that she approached a lot of the problems that she faced throughout her career, whether that had to do with the discrimination that she faced being a woman in a male-dominated field, all the way up to just pushing her science agendas and getting science adopted by policymakers. This photograph shows Diana doing what she does best, and that was mentoring early career researchers. This was a workshop that she organized to help to organize. To help early career researchers who are participating in national programs from countries that are they're Antarctic Treaty signatory countries, but they're underrepresented in their presence in the work that they do in Antarctica. So here is Diana giving pro tips, nuts and bolts advice to early career researchers who are trying to kickstart careers in doing terrestrial ecological research in Antarctica. And so moving forward, Diana's legacy to me, certainly, and to all of us, if she were here, would just to say, keep pushing, keep moving, keep asking hard questions, keep getting the science done, get those papers published, suckers. She would always say, "Let's get this sucker published, get those proposals done." Moving forward, I think that my legacy certainly is to continue Diana's, which is to continue pushing back the boundaries of ignorance and to help make the world a better place by expanding the importance of the understanding of soil biodiversity.
Thank you very much, Byron, for that. And if I could now invite Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Johan. So great to hear these stories from everyone. I gave like a talk at ESA, so hopefully I'm not going to cry today, but it's okay if we do. So I called my talk "The Heart of Soil Biodiversity," which Diana really was. And as I'm listening today, I'm like, she was kind of the sun for all of us. Like we all rotated around her. I started with her in 2012, and I included this horrific picture of my haircut in 2012 because I can just hear Diana, like anytime she got praise or like was the focus of attention, she just really did not want to be. She deflected. And so like as a penance, I'm sharing this photo for Diana. And I also, preparing for today, I was going through my emails and I have so many emails from her. And I tried to look for Yippee because I'm pretty sure she's messaged that to me before. It's probably in a different email though. When we were successful, she had these like great exclamations like "Yippee!" A very serious face. And anyone who's been her student, been mentored by her knows what I mean, like the serious Diana face when you look over and you're like, "Whoa, someone's messed up," and hopefully it wasn't me. And I just have really enjoyed thinking about and remembering those times with her. This email, I had already finished with her, and it's just like exactly Diana's voice. She's just like rambles on. She was like, it was quite a 70-person assemblage. She's like so excited. There was 800 plus questions. Then she went to E.O. Wilson Symposium. It was great. And then she finishes that paragraph with just a fun time. Like she was so busy on her way home from New Zealand. And then she continues on and starts going on about our paper. She's listing people. Every one of us has got an email where she starts listing. Like Cecilia's gone, Mike Gusoff, Keith and I have been madly working where she's just listing people. And I probably didn't know who Mike Gusoff was. Like, I'm like, okay, sure, who are all these people? And continues on. And I just like reading this takes me back to her enthusiasm for her job and for her mentees. So I started working, she hired me, I met her at AGU, we did a quick interview in 2011, and she hired me. And she asked if I would travel with her to London in March, and I had not finished my PhD yet. I had like a couple more months till I graduated, but I wanted to go and get the hang of what the GSBI was. And I made a couple of mistakes. Right away, I did not check my bag, or I checked my bag. I did not bring carry-on. So I got like the serious Diana face because we had to wait at the airport for my bag, which was a mistake. We are always in a hurry. We have to be everywhere on time. And then I didn't have a suit. And I realized like Diana dressed, this was more of a policy conference. This wasn't ESA where there's like river sandals and flannels, right? There were a lot of people in suits because there's a lot of policy going on. And so I like went and bought a suit in London to make sure that I could dress like Diana and match her professionalism. So at this conference, as soon as we get to the hotel, we have a meeting, and like it has been said, Diana likes to socialize. And so we had a few people there, we got our beers, and Diana starts talking, and I had a notebook and I was just writing down every name that she said, thinking that I needed to remember this, which half the names I did need to. And so I went back to my room that night and looked all of these people up so I knew who they were and how they were related to soil biodiversity or some policy that she was part of. And it was just such a whirlwind. I love these stories that people are sharing too in the chat. Hopefully you will also share your stories in the chat. It's really lovely. So once I started officially with Diana, I'm going to shout out to SOJUS. First, I got to participate in the SOJUS Fellows group. Oh, I forget what it's called now. Anyways, where you learn about science communication. And so that was a really huge eye-opener for me to the importance of science communication, which she had from the Aldo Fellowship that she had been nominated for. And she recognized how valuable it is to communicate science clearly and use visuals. And she was so meticulous. So I have a bunch of visuals that we developed over the years for GSBI. We had a fantastic person helping us with all the visuals in SOJUS. Anyway, so we went to Rio for the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio +20, if you all remember this. And our flight was delayed. And so we had to drive back to Fort Collins from Denver because there was thunderstorms in Houston or something. So by the time we got to leave, we actually only had 2 nights in Rio. And we just like got in a taxi, flew around the city, went to all the meetings. And it was such a whirlwind. I was like, is this what she does normally? Like I was exhausted. I think I was 28 at the time. And I was like, how is she doing this? I'm so tired. And she was not even phased, because she was going on more trips than I was. At the same time, she was working on the GSBI and coordinating this. She was also doing seven other projects, especially SOJUS. And I just couldn't believe she did all of that. So like I said, we had a great graphic designer working for us at SOJUS at the time, and Diana was meticulous. Like I would work with the graphic designer and come up with images, and we would go show it to Diana, and then she would pick out the things and recognize like what was good and what was bad. And she was just so good at that. And I'm so grateful to learn that I got to learn those skills from her, because I think I can now pass that on to my mentees. And it made such a difference that she was so focused on these details, because everything was so professional. It elevated the GSBI to that global initiative that we really wanted it to be immediately. It didn't look like it was like thrown together. You would have thought that they were giving us tons of money for this. Really, it was just her asking the university to pay for my salary as a postdoc. And then she used the SOJUS people to work on it. But it was just really fantastic what she was able to do. So after that first whirlwind of tours, we went to Rio. Then at the same time, I started keeping track of all the countries at some point that had signed up for the GSBI, right? She wanted everyone to have signed up. We wanted this all green. When after we signed up to Rio, I went, this was like to have a meeting with Wim and Richard and Johan to talk about the GSBI. And this was my first trip with her where it was like it wasn't as much of a conference. I think we had swung by Germany for a more professional conference where I think that was that was this one, Global Soils Week. That was such a policy conference. Diana was so in her element. She had her full suit on, her red nails on. We were like the only two women in some of the sessions, it felt like. There was only the sea of men. And it was just so fabulous to be working with her and her as my example. Anytime I go to a professional conference where I need to be like, where I'm one of the few women there, I always wear heels because she was quite tall, right? And I'm not tall, so I had to step it up a little bit. So Eco-Finders, we went to Wageningen, and she had lived in Wageningen and knew the area and was really good friends with Wim van der Putten and was really excited. So I was really excited to go there. I had never like interacted that much with international scientists, so it was such a special experience. I definitely overindulged on beer with the Brits and learned my lesson and got the serious face from Diana when I was late for the session the next day. I blame their drinking, not myself. I learned my lesson though. During the whole time we were also doing research. So she was really excited to work on this project in Central Park. Where did I put it? Oh, I guess I didn't include it. So we went to Central Park in New York City because this was part of this whole policy science communication activity where we wanted to bring awareness to soil biodiversity. And with my previous supervisor, Noah Fear, we went to Central Park and collected samples across the park, 600 samples to look at the soil biodiversity in Central Park. And we used this as like a jumping off point for media. And it worked really well. And I think I got a lot of attention thinking about bringing awareness of soil biodiversity to folks in the city. So that was going on at the same time. And then we started planning for the Global Soil Biodiversity Atlas in Fort Collins. And that a few people have already mentioned. And so here's us really cold in Fort Collins. And I've seen a lot of names in the chat today of people who are part of this or part of other groups with Diana. So it's nice to see you all online. And so we organized the Atlas and with the Europeans, the Joint Research Center, our European Commission helped us finish it a couple years later. Then like we went to Milan at some point and Rome to have a meeting for this. It's a little hard to keep track. I don't know how she did all of it. I was only with her for just under 2 years and I was exhausted when I left. So Diana led the way. She's really our soil superhero. I tallied up previously this summer when I gave a talk about the GSBI, like all her impact that she had. And obviously she had like tons of publications, but her true impact was her heart and her enthusiasm for her students and for the research. And I just want to point out, so like in 2012, the GSBI started, and this is if we look at publications on soil biodiversity and policy. And I really think Diana is responsible for this huge increase after the GSBI started and the Global Atlas was published, that we continued to get this huge increase in interest in soil biodiversity and policy. So how did she have this lasting impact? Her dedication and passion, support, mentorship, and leadership that Dorota has talked about, and I know Andreas is going to talk about too. That 5 a.m. and weekends working. I was really lucky. I was a postdoc later after after she had had some European postdocs like Martijn, who was like, I don't come in on Sundays. And so she didn't expect me to come in on Sundays. She would get riled up. That passion, it was good. It was so amazing to see someone so enthusiastic and riled up for good things when we got something published or something. If someone was causing issues, she would get riled up and figure out a solution to it. She was really good at building those teams, like Val said. I've learned so much from her about how to network and how to build teams of scientists. And basically, I remember her one time just saying, look around the room. If someone is not represented, we need to invite them. And that went from discipline to gender to where they were from in the world, right? Making sure we had the Southern Hemisphere represented. That was really important to her. And she led by example, I think. She didn't want any focus on her, but her example was just fantastic. Oh yeah, so this was the Sustainability Leadership Fellows. This is what I talked about, the science communication aspect of SOJUS. And for anybody who has students, I highly recommend this program that she designed. It's so great. And I have journalist contacts now from that fellowship because of her. So I learned how to dress from her. I learned how to exude confidence, how to build up a team, and really how to change the world. She was such a huge influence on me and how I went forward in science. After we had got the atlas rolling, we applied for a fellowship with ESTIV in Germany. And we had a workshop on bringing soil biodiversity data together. And that's where I left Fort Collins and moved to Germany and then joined WIM's lab in the Netherlands. And I kind of wrapped up my time with her with the first GSBI meeting in Dijon, which was really a fantastic meeting. And we got to have a whole bunch of people from her lab joined us there. I want to finish with one more story about Dijon. I remember she wasn't in charge of the speaking portion of it, but she was like pacing her around because someone had gone over their time. And I think eventually she just went up on stage and was like, thank you, and got them off the stage. That was such a Diana thing to do. And now I'm really good at timekeeping, and I feel like I got that from her as well. So how can we ensure Diana's legacy? I really love this. She said, we can't sit around and wait for more wildfires and more pollution and more landfill and more epidemics. We have to say we know enough right now and start working on all of these full force. And I think that's what many of us are doing. And with that, I'm going to say thanks. Here's some photos of us. Our first Global Soil Biodiversity Conference, many of the lab members there. This was our meeting in the middle here. This is a fantastic photo of our first meeting for the GSBI at Planet Under Pressure. And then this is the Soil Ecology Society meeting with some of the lab and Josh Schimmel. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I think we know why you work together with Diana now. So if I could invite André to also talk about mentorship.
All right, thank you very much, Johan, and thank you, the GSBI, for organizing this, just giving us the chance to listen to some of these wonderful stories that everyone has shared so far. It's really a great time and great to help us moving to a more celebratory stage of remembering Diana. So my story with Diana and with soil biodiversity starts at the UN conference that Kelly just referred to. That was 2012. And there was this Rio +20 conference in Brazil. So that had a very big impact on me and on my career. And the fun fact is that I wasn't even there. The whole thing was that my advisor went to that meeting, and Diana was down there with Kelly, and George Brown and others had put together this side event on soil biodiversity during that conference. So my PhD advisor at the time was there, and he went to that event. And he came back to our institution with this little flyer of the newly formed GSBI. And the flyer basically told a story about the importance of soil biodiversity for many different ecosystem functions. And then it made the point about this new global network being formed, and that people around the globe were invited to join for us and to do something about protecting and also raising awareness of soil biodiversity. So he came back and he knocked my door on my office and said, look, I just came back from this conference in Rio, and there was these folks there talking about this newly formed global initiative. It's about soil biodiversity. We were a biogeochemistry lab, but the focus was really on the geochemistry, not that much bio going on. So it was fun to me that he came back and said, look, this soil biodiversity thing seems important. People are talking about this. There is this global network now. So, and it seems important for some of the questions you were trying to answer in your dissertation. So think about this, do a little research, and let's think about incorporating some aspect of soil biodiversity into your research. From that point on, what happened was that we start researching and we start being convinced that soil biodiversity was important for the specific questions we were trying to answer in my dissertation. And of course, it was natural for us to get in touch with Diana and say, look, Diana, can you talk to us a little more about these things? And we also start talking with George Brown and others to get guidance on how we could incorporate some aspects of soil biodiversity in my research. So from those Zoom calls, well, it wasn't even Zoom at the time, right? We were doing Skype calls. From those, it was just natural that we decided that I would go to her lab and spend time there as a research internship during my PhD to get more ideas on how to approach soil biodiversity in my research. So a few months after that, I was in Fort Collins doing a one-year research internship with Diana. Their one-year internship became a postdoc later on, so I ended up spending 3 years as a postdoc and then many more years as in different roles in her lab. I spent a total of 8 years working there. And as you notice from this story, it's totally Diana's fault. They end up working on soil biodiversity, and then I end up developing a career on soil biodiversity. So she's truly the one to blame for that. Of course, I'm joking on that. I'm very grateful that my supervisor was in that meeting and met her, and that really changed my career without me even being there. So that's the context there that I started working with her. And then I moved to Colorado and had the chance to work with this amazing team. There's more people that I interact while there, but I want to just mention here 2 people that I think they were very key for the success of Diana's lab at CSU. One being Cecilia Tomazel, the lab manager, still there. Cecilia was really an instrumental component of Diana's program there. Very key for my adaptation. It was my first time abroad, and I could barely speak English when I first got there. So I had a ton of help from these folks on just getting settled there. And the second person is Jarvis Chowri, who was also a very key component in the success that Diana's program had. I think, and Diana always recognized those 2 people as really being very instrumental to everything we did, all the cool science we were able to do in Diana's lab. Other than that, what I found there was a very vibrant intellectual environment with these amazing colleagues. I see here in this picture, Ashley Shaw, Elizabeth Back, Walter Andriusi. Some of those might be watching this. It was just a very vibrant environment because Diana was that type of person. She was dynamic. She was sending emails all the time. We were talking about questions, about papers coming out. So in 1 year there, I learned so much, and I was so excited about the stuff that was going on there, that I was glad that I got the chance to stay longer. So Diana is a mentor. The points that I want to emphasize here are the very first conversation that she had with me once I get there. And she came to me, I got to Fort Collins with 2 young kids, right? And that was very different from Diana's lifestyle. And she was careful enough to come to me and say, look, my lifestyle is rather chaotic in terms of my work style. I travel a lot. I start early. I finish late. But I want you to know that you don't need to be me. No one needs to be me to succeed inside, to have successful insights. And that was really eye-opening. And she was right. She was not necessarily a great example of life balance, right? I think everyone who worked with Diana at some point knows that. She was working. But she was careful enough, at least at that point in her life, to come to us and say, look, you don't have to be me. You can have success in science being you. And it's actually the most important thing that you bring to the job is you, your perspectives, your background, Everything you learn is very different from the way I learn. And that's how we become a great team. And that was great. There was something that made me a lot more comfortable in working with someone who was very intimidating to me at first, right? Because this was Diana Wall. And she didn't know that she was who she was. That was the funny thing. She was so humble all the time. And it was great to work with her. The other aspect that I want to mention is that she was the king of networking and help facilitating her young colleagues to network. Sure. I end up, soon after I joined her lab, I end up finding myself in dinner tables with some of my science heroes, some of the great science policy or science journalists. And she was always very keen to introduce us to these people. Not only that, but tell these people about the fun science we were doing, so we could be in touch with those folks about, collaborating or putting together a story about our projects. So this was great. And most of when I go to conference like ESA or any others, most of the people that I hang out with are folks that Diana introduced to me during my very first trips with her to this conference. She was a very close mentor. She liked to be close. And I think most of that just because she had fun with science. She loved science. All those Eureka moments that we had, she loved sharing those moments with us. So she wants to be involved. She wants to know about results, any analysis that we were doing. Sometimes she couldn't really understand the statistical analysis we were doing, but she still wants to know about it and the details and the conclusions that we get out of that. So she likes to be close, and I also learned a lot from that. Another aspect is that it was very fun when we got a paper published or someone dropped a compliment on us, how happy she was. She was cheering for us very, very hard. And I heard from people, even after I left CSU, I heard from folks that, look, you got to talk to Diana because she's still cheering about you. You already got your job, you got your career, you're fine. But she keeps like cheering like you were here still working for her. So it was very fun and to share with her any success that we had, even the tiny stuff, right? Even the little things like getting a paper published, she was very happy to share the joy of those moments with us. And there was a lot of fun. She had to be convinced when we want to do an experiment or some side project. She really had to be convinced. I remember Cecilia and myself and others trying to convince her to do a greenhouse experiment on this project that we were working on. And it took a lot of convincing power to get her on the table and accepting to do that. But after we did the work and the results were rather cool, she came to us and said, look, I'm very glad that you guys don't listen to me all the time. This was indeed a great experiment, and I'm glad we did that. So anyways, it was a very fun and collaborative environment in general to work with her. And we all had a lot of fun during those intense years. This is a little picture of me and Diana in the field plots for the project that I'm mainly working on at CSU. I had many side projects there, but this was like the one that I worked on for 3 years. And she would come to the field with us and be always there, want to know what's going on. So those were also fun moments in the field. We had a side project in Brazil, in the Amazon, so we took a few trips there. Here's us with a few of CSU colleagues, but also local colleagues from Brazilian institutes. Those were great, and she was actually proving to everyone that she was not someone just to be there and doing politics or just visiting field sites. She actually did a lot of work. Here is she with some of the local colleagues sieving soils, and I remember very well how we spent the whole day doing that. And at the end of the day, we of course went out for a nice beer, which she was always happy to do. I want to finish this with this. I think this is a great picture of her, but I want to read on a more personal note the very last text message that I had with her. And there was by the occasion of her birthday last year. I was in Brazil for New Year's, and I sent her a text saying, hey, happy birthday. I already told you this many times, you were the best. I'm so lucky for calling you a friend, a colleague, and a mentor. Raising a glass for you today, all the best. And she replied, thank you, it's been a fun day. I'm celebrating with my cousin, sister, and 98-year-old aunt. Thank you, and she sent a little heart emoji. So I consider myself one of those lucky people who could call Diana a great friend, a great mentor. I miss her a lot, but I want to celebrate her every day because I wouldn't be where I am without her. Thank you.
Thank you, André. And last not but least, Carlos.
Thank you, Byron. So this might have been the hardest presentation that I ever tried to do. And what's interesting to me is I still don't know what I'm going to say. That's first. And second is that I see many of the interactions that Kelly had and Byron and all the others in many of the interactions that I had with Diana, and many of those feelings that you got, it's the same, or I feel in some regards the same. So I tried to give it a title just to help me think through it. And what I think Diana, or my experience with Diana, was that she had a thing for materializing dreams. Because when I met her, and so I met her in 2018, and at the time, there was no monitoring, large-scale monitoring of soils. So my dream, and dreams of many other people, was to have one. So the idea was that we could have a monitoring system if everyone worked together. Yeah, multiple countries, multiple people, different labs, all voluntary. So everyone pitching in money that they don't have, and this somehow would work. That was my dream. And in reality, when I met her, I really thought, so first of all, I met Diana as I would meet anyone in the streets. That's what it felt to me. I didn't felt that I was meeting someone that was a scientific god. It just meant that I met someone in the street that was talking to me in a very easy way, in a very positive way, and then everything was possible. That's what I got from this meeting, where everyone else's was scratching their heads and thinking, how is this going to be even feasible? I think me and Diana, at least that's what I felt, we felt that it would be possible. And being possible sometimes is the only step that you need to move forward. That's at least how I always felt when dealing with her, is that if it is possible, then we should do it. Yeah. So this meeting in 2018 was in Leipzig. We invited her and a bunch of other people from multiple places. Just listening to Kelly, thinking that when you have a meeting, you have to invite everyone from everywhere, from every slice of society. We try to do that as much as possible. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kelly, you were also there. So we tried to do that as much as we could. And then, because it was possible, maybe not feasible, but possible, we then grew this idea of a possible global monitoring system that could serve as a reference for everything in terms of soil monitoring, soil biodiversity monitoring. We grew that idea to get the support of the European Commission, to get the support of the FAO, to get the support of many international institutions. And I said this to many people in the past, what I felt during this time and in the last years, that me and Diana, we would work in tandem. It felt like she covered a part of this dialogue that I couldn't, and that I covered another part of the dialogue that she couldn't. And working in tandem, we started convincing what it felt like everyone, that this was not only possible, but it was also feasible, and more important, necessary. That's why listening to everyone before me was so heartwarming, because it's like that. So when you're trying to build an impossible dream, you just have to make it possible first. And then you just have to make everyone think that they need it. Yeah? And that's at least how it felt to me. So we went to Italy. This is in Italy. We had fun. Everyone was having fun. And we were building what is now a global network of people, voluntary network without any budget, everyone pitching in, monitoring the system that tries to monitor biodiversity. So out of those discussions, and this was also something that I got, for sure I got from Diana, was that in order to make everyone need this, we would have to convince not everyone. So we didn't need to convince everyone to get everyone to need this thing. And what we made it was, we made it in a way that we would have to have the scientific support of to create this idea of a global monitoring system, for sure. But then we would have to have policy interest on making this idea a reality. And we published a paper on it. We published a paper that, again, we always would say together that this is not, our proposal is not to make the best system in the world. We are just trying to make a possible system that functions everywhere, because we really thought that we should not worry about Europe, we should not worry about the US, we should worry about everyone else. And then Europe and the US, for them it would be easy. Yeah. So with that, Soilborne emerged. We started building our ideas, our ways of looking at soil monitoring. We started building monitoring kits with all her experience, with me trying to figure out how to do things, because actually I'm an engineer by default. So we did prototypes of how to monitor soils in the most simplest way possible. And she was always worried about different soil types. She always picked my brain on how would that work in this particular soil, in that particular soil. And we had to actually sample different types of soil and all of that. And we did all of that while talking what it felt to me normal, but I was told by Wim a while ago that that would not be normal, because we talked every month or every 2 weeks or every week. Actually, unfortunately, in the week that she passed away, I was supposed to talk to her just the next day. And yeah, so after all of that, that was what we could do. So we participated in conferences, we communicated, we went to the field to see different aspects of how we would actually monitor soils, how we would understand and interpret soils. This was always my relationship with her, with a glass of wine, a bit of conversation, and it seemed to me seamless. It never felt to me that I was talking with someone that was looking down to me. It always felt that I was talking with a friend, just one that I met over coffee, and we were just cheering for something. What she also gave me was a passion to bring completely different scientific backgrounds to the discussion of soils. And one of these examples, what you can see here, is how to communicate that soils are beautiful, having great pictures, interacting with journalists, interacting with photographers, interacting with video makers. I had the pleasure of doing all of that, but also bringing nature conservation aspects to the soil biodiversity discussion, to move away from agriculture and to move away from what would be the business as usual. It was really interesting to explore Diana's mind on what could be the option for what is not business as usual. What would be the concept for that? And we tried to publish some papers on that. We still work a lot on that. And all this entire work was inspired by the vision that soils are really beautiful, or can be really beautiful, if you just show them, if it is only possible. just coming to what Kelly said, that things have to be well communicated. So while Diana was alive, I started collaborating with the European Parliament on what is now, or what's the proposal for a soil monitoring law. And I did not want to do that, to be honest. And I was kind of convinced by Diana, because Diana told me, well, Carlos, if we don't do this, if we don't do this type of thing, you know, you will never have the actual impact that we want to have. And when I was working in this case for the European Parliament, providing some advice, I always kept this in mind. And at the end of all of this, what happened was that unfortunately Diana died. But what it meant to me is that I needed to make sure that at least, so in the European Parliament, everything takes time. So they are still discussing this law. But the first step was that there was a law that translated our futuristic vision of a possible future. And I went to the European Parliament. We produced a report with hundreds of scientists, because cooperation is the word. And we managed to pass it. So now there is a proposal for a law that matches what is this vision for a futuristic future that is possible. So everyone talked about their personal relationships with Diana. I had a very close contact with her for a long time. And I had the pleasure to visit her in Colorado and to stay at her place. And for me, the beautiful thing about that visit was that it was not about seeing a different side of Diana, to be honest. It was to see, well, it was to get away from going with her to the gym. She tried that. Fortunately, now listening to Byron, I moved away from that. But it was also to have these countertop discussions and to interact with her at a different level while her cats were just walking around. And that was, for me, very important and very, very beautiful to have. And I also had the pleasure to interview Diana, because we held a podcast, again, having this in communication aspect in mind. And I don't know if you are able to listen. If you are not, please let me know. I have another way for you to listen. But if you don't mind, I would like to play just 2 minutes of this interview, where a student of mine asks her what is her advice for the future students of soil ecology. So if you don't mind, I'll play this.
I think everybody is aware that our ecosystems are changing, and there's a lot in an ecosystem, and we need people not only who are scientists, academicians, but we need scientists in many different jobs, whether they're teachers or whether they're radio announcers or whether they're TV announcers or work in policy or whether they work in the tropics. We need them to speak science, show them where the evidence is, and then also be very aware of the different parts of the ecosystem that we know so little about that are going to affect us in the future. Changes in soil, changes in water, changes in plant productivity. I just think there's a lot to study from different angles, and you can do it whether you're an academician or you want to do something else, but use your science. So do it.
Yeah, do it. That's what she told me all the time. And she ends this interview by saying, Carlos, there's a lot to do. Just do it. So on my end, I'll try to do it. And I would hope that as a legacy, many of you also try to do it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. That was also the perfect introduction for the last little bit, and I would like to make people aware of, to kind of also close this Remembrance webinar. And I mean, as it was made clear by many, but then especially also at the end by Carlos, is that obviously a GSBI needs to continue, not only for its goal, but obviously also in honor of Diana. I think we all know, the importance of GSBI and that it's really, about informing the public of the importance of soil biodiversity, and we are all trying to contribute to that. We have many members at the moment from many different countries. It was also mentioned indeed that it's not only the Western countries, but the South was very important for Diana, and I think she indeed accomplished that by doing these different activities that she had a lot of force for, and was really trying to make people connecting, learning about it, and really talking about it and trying to get it all the way into policy. Now, as you can imagine, is that obviously with Diana not being there anymore at CSU, there's a change that will happen. So GSBI will be basically leaving CSU in April 2026. That's the plan at the moment. So there's still some time, but also not that much time. And so in that sense, with the three of us, with Wem, Richard, and I, we're really looking for an enthusiastic bid for keeping the GSBI going, for the next secretariat of the GSBI, because as you can imagine, it cannot function, even though there's many people involved at the moment, it cannot function without a secretariat. And so we would like to see some bids, coming in, basically for a 5-year plan at first, for hosting the GSBI and how you see it developing. Obviously, you must know that it costs, and so that's something that you have to keep in mind. And basically, from the years that Diana was running it, we know that it costs, somewhere between 45 and 65 USD per year. And in that sense, we would like to have, many of you starting to think about it, maybe come up with a plan, design it, make it a feasible plan. We would like by the 1st of March of 2025 that you indeed have sent in that bid to that email that is given there. And so that we can actually start planning together, also with, Colorado State on how to have that transition happening. And then hopefully by 2026, we can have the transition finished. In that sense, I think it's important also, that as many of you as possible can attend the Global Soil Biodiversity Conference. I mean, it was already mentioned in the chat, but that's also where we can then further, talk about how the GSBI is really going to be moving forward. I think all of you received the newsletter this morning, and if you scroll down, then you can actually find some more details on the bid, what it really entails, how we're seeing it moving forward. And so I would really like you to, have a look at that and consider, being part of making GSBI continue. With that, I would like to thank everybody for attending. I see that, I saw actually a lot of contributions in the webinar. That's very nice, and as I said, this will be, also kept on record. So thank you for that. Monica also indicated that it will be shared with the family of Diana. And so I think this is very nice, and I would really like to thank you for those contributions. And if I could now actually invite the other panelists to also turn on your video so that we can say a proper goodbye to everybody in remembrance of Diana. Okay. Well, thanks again, and see you all.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.